Hello all and welcome to this hands-on lab. In our lab today, we will learn how to work with AWS App Runner to deploy a Python app whose source code is stored in GitHub. Before we continue further ahead, a couple of things to keep in mind. AWS services used in this lab can incur charges. Hence, ensure that you clean up all resources after completing this lab. Prerequisites for our lab today is knowledge of AWS App Runner service. Hence, if you do not know what this service is all about, please refer to this overview tutorial that I had created some time back. The URL to this tutorial is mentioned right here at the bottom. I will also have this URL mentioned in the description of this video. Scenario for our lab today. As I mentioned earlier, we will be deploying a simple Python app using AWS App Runner service. Reference URLs. So these URLs are pretty helpful, right, for this particular lab. In fact, the first two URLs are extremely important because if you don't have a simple Python application, right, or you don't know how to code in Python, whatever the case may be, right, you can use these two URLs to copy the source code and create a simple Python application. Remember, the focus of this lab is to understand how to work with AWS App Runner service and not to create a complex Python application. So as long as you have a simple Python app that you can play around with, you will be absolutely fine. In fact, I have this URL open right here. So this is the URL, right? Getting started with App Runner. And these are the steps. And if you scroll down right here, it basically has a source code, right? So you can see it has a file name, right? And the source code for you to copy right here. So it has two files, requirements.txt and server.py, and you can pretty much copy the source code from here. Again, it's a very simple piece of code. As you see, it's a hello world, right? It's nothing crazy. And the focus of this lab is not to go crazy with the Python source code, but to focus on how you can leverage AWS App Runner service to deploy this particular piece of code, right? Okay, so let's continue further ahead. Step one. First thing that we need to do is we need to create a GitHub repo, right? So go to GitHub, right? This is the repo name that particular reference URL uses. You can pretty much create a repo with any name of your choice. We will be creating two files. The first file is requirements.txt. And the second file that we will be creating is server.py. And this is a source code for those files. Again, I have just copied the source code over here for reference purposes. You can always copy the code right from the reference URL. So from right here. Okay. So this is my GitHub account, right? I'm going to create a new repository over here. And I'm going to call this repository App Runner. Again, you can use Python hello or anything that you like. It's totally up to you, right? And I'm going to go ahead and create a repository. And now I'm going to add a file to my repo. So let us go and copy the source code. So this is a source code. This is the name of the file, requirements.txt. So I'm going to copy this name, right? And we are going to add a file right here. So click on this link, creating a new file. I'm going to paste the name right here, right? Go back, copy the source code and paste it right here. Scroll down, commit new file. So we've created requirements.txt. Now we will create another file that is server.py. Click on add file, click on create new file, paste the name right here, go back, copy the source code, come over here and paste the source code right there. Scroll down and commit new file. So we have basically created a repo and created the two files, right? So we have completed step 1. Step 2. Now it totally depends how you are logged in within AWS, right? Whether your user has administrative privileges, does not have administrative privileges, or what kind of access you have. In my case, I have administrative privileges, but just in case if your user does not have those privileges, ensure that your user has this particular policy attached to itself, right? So in order to go ahead and deploy the application, you will need full access to AWS App Runner. So let me go back, and just to show you, I have just created this sample app run user. So assume that this is your user, right? So go to add permissions and attach existing policies directly. Go and look for app runner. This is the policy that I'm talking about, AWS App Runner full access. And basically go ahead and associate this policy to your user. This is purely for demo purposes. I'm not going to use this user, but ensure that your user, whenever you are creating an application, or if you're working with this lab, if you don't have administrative privileges, ensure that your user has this particular existing policy attached to itself, right? Okay. So this step is complete. So perform this step if this step is applicable to your user. Step 3. So we already have a source code in GitHub now. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create an app runner service. So we will basically go to AWS App Runner. We will create the service. And remember, we have to deploy our Python application using a source code. So we will select the option over here as source code repo. And since our source code is stored in GitHub, right? If you have never used GitHub previously with AWS, it will basically ask you to create a new connection. So go ahead and give a connection name and your GitHub account details, right? If it gives you an option to install or something, go ahead and do that. If it does not, then continue further ahead. Select your repository and your branch, right? And then beyond that, we will go ahead further with our deployment settings. So let us complete these steps until repository and branch. So I'm going to close this, right? And this is my app runner service. So click on create app runner service. So click here. Remember, we have to deploy from a source code repo. So I'm going to select this option, right? Now it's telling me that I need to create a connection for GitHub. So click on this add new button. And I'm going to give it a connection name. So I'm going to say my GitHub. You can give any name that you like. This is my GitHub account. In your case, go ahead and select your account. I have worked with this earlier, but if it gives you an option to install or anything of that sort, as you see, there's install another, then go ahead and perform that installation, right? And click on next. So the connection was successful to GitHub. Now go over here and select your repository. So this is my repository app runner. Select your branch, right? So these are the steps that we just saw, all of these. So we've completed these steps. Now we need to go ahead with our deployment settings. So we are going to select automatic for our deployments, right? And after that, we will go through these build settings, wherein we will configure all the settings over there. We will choose our runtime environment as Python, and then give these commands, right? For our build command and a start command, and finally provide the port number and proceed further ahead. So these are my deployment settings right here. Now select automatic. Now read what it says over here, right? It says every push to the branch deploys a new version of your service, and we want that. Hence, we are selecting automatic. Click on next, and these are your build settings, right? So either you can use a configuration file or you can provide your configuration settings right here. Now for this particular lab, we are going to say configure all settings over here. But if you want to use a configuration file, then go ahead and select this, right? And then it basically says over here that some settings are read from the app runner.yaml configuration file in your repo. Now remember, I shared with you the reference URLs. One of the URLs over here, in fact, I think it is the second one in that list, right? So if you go to Python platform, and if you come here, so this is our requirements.txt, our server.py, but if you scroll down, you will see a sample app runner.yaml, and you can actually copy the code from here itself. So it's up to you if you want to take the route of using an app runner.yaml as a configuration file. But for this lab, we are going to keep it simple, right? And we are going to say configure all settings over here. So we are going to select our runtime as Python 3. So select Python 3. Then we have to provide a build command and a start command. So a build command is going to be pip install -r requirements.txt. Now this requirements.txt file, if you go back and look at your code, right? Let me go back here. It basically says, okay, let me prerequisites. And okay, I think I have lost that. Okay, so I found that piece of code. So this is requirements.txt. And if you see, it says pyramid 2.0. Now, if we go back over here, this build command basically says that this command runs in the root directory of your repository when a new code version is deployed. Use it to install dependencies or compile your code. So essentially what we are trying to tell over here is that install pyramid 2.0 because that is one of the dependencies that this particular app uses, right? And it actually gives you the command right here. So what you can do if you really want is say pip install, and you can actually just copy the command, right? And then paste it right there. Your start command is going to be python server.py. That's our only file, and that's the file that we are going to start with. Server.py. Your port is 8080 by default, and that's the port that we are using as well. So click next. Now we need to work on our service settings. So we have to provide a name for our service, and this is a simple lab. So I'm going to keep the CPU as 1 and memory as 2 GB, right? So let's give a name over here. So say my app runner lab or something like that. You can give any name that you like. I'm going to keep the virtual CPU as 1 and memory as 2 GB. Now, if you go back to your code, right, the server.py code, you will see that it actually uses an environment variable called as name. So let us go ahead and add that environment variable right here. Right, so click on add environment variable. Key is name, and value you can give your name or any value that you like. So I'm going to give my name, right? So this is this step right here. Key is name and value is your name, right? Leave rest of the settings as default. So everything remains as is. So leave all of these settings as default. Click on next. This is everything that you've just provided, so you can review your configuration. Scroll down, and click on create and deploy. Now, after you click on create and deploy, be patient. It takes some time for the service to get deployed, right? So we have basically completed these steps. Now, this note down over here is something, if you would like to explore further, you can do that. If you would like to review or view the deployment log, you can click on this create service link under deployment logs. So if I go here, right, you can see the status is in progress. And this is this create service link. So if you click on this link, it says is loading the deployment logs. And you will see, if you keep on refreshing this, you will see the deployment log being loaded right here. And you will see each and every step that app runner is performing behind the scenes to deploy your application, right? So you can refresh it on timely basis and you will basically see the log being populated over here. So I'm going to pause the recording, right? And I will come back in a little bit. So as you see over here, my deployment has started, right? So it's saying basically starting to build your application source code. It's kind of installing some packages. Some of those packages were successfully installed. So step by step, it is going to tell me what all it is doing behind the scenes. So refresh it and you'll be able to see the additional steps as it moves further ahead. So here, if you see, it's telling me successfully built and it's even tagged my application image, right? So it created the container and it installed my image. It tagged my image as latest, right? So it's continuing further ahead. So it's still in progress. Hopefully it gets deployed faster. So it's performing health check, right? This is the event log right here. It's provisioning instances, deploying my image. Remember that this image is been created using your source code, right? So it used your source code to create an image and then provision the instances and create the container and deploy it. So it's still in progress. And let's see where it is. So it's still over there, right? It's going to take some more time. So I'll come back shortly. So as you see, it's created my service successfully. You can also see service creation completed successfully right here in the event log, right? So everything went fine and we have completed step 3. The next step for us is to browse our application. So use the default domain URL to browse your application. So your default domain URL is right here, right? You see, So click on this particular URL, and this is my application right there saying hello Nam. Right, so we have completed step 4. Now, when we deployed this application or this service actually, we selected automatic deployment, if you remember, right? And at that time, I believe I pointed out that anytime you make a change to your source code, it would automatically be deployed. So let us test that. So what we will do is we will make a change in our server.py and then commit that change. And then those changes should be committed or deployed automatically, right? And then we will go ahead and browse our changes. So let's do that. So this is my server.py. Okay, I'm going to edit it. And we will say over here, what will we say? We will, okay, let's make this change. Instead of hello Nam, I'm going to make it welcome, right? To your app, and then my name coming there. So these are the changes that we have made. I'm going to scroll down and commit changes. Now remember, right now it is hello Nam, and I'm refreshing this. So the changes have not yet been committed. I mean, it's have not yet been deployed, sorry. But if we go back and we look at our app runner, you can see that my service status is operation in progress. So click on the service name, and it is in progress, right? It is, the deployment has just started. So let me go back and click here, refresh. Nope. Okay. It is in progress. So it's going to go through the whole cycle of rebuilding the code and then deploying the application all over again. And once that is completed successfully, we will go ahead and refresh our URL, right? So it's telling me that my changes were successfully deployed, right? And my application should be up and running. So let us test that, right? So go back over here to the app URL. Now this is the old message that we have. If I refresh this, right, and if my changes were successfully deployed, then we should have our welcome message. So let's go ahead and refresh it. And these are our changes. So our changes were successfully deployed. So we have basically committed this step. So I hope that this particular hands-on lab was helpful. You can see that using AWS App Runner service, I can pretty much deploy a Python application very easily, or for that matter of fact, even a Node.js application pretty easily, right? So do explore this service, try it out first and see if this is something that you would like to work with, if this is something that's truly helpful to you. Perhaps use a complex application, but first just explore the service and see what the service has to offer. So this is it from me today, right? I will see you sometime later with some other video. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.